Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
And today we're traveling to Korea. Well, maybe not the Korean mainland. We're actually going to Jeju Island, which is a popular tourist destination. Lots of people go there for its beaches and its other attractions. And something very unique about this island is the women who can dive down into the water and fetch up various things from the seafloor. And they can stay underwater for a long time. And it's quite an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, and some are quite elderly, you might say. Some of these women are even in their 80s, and they're still diving under the sea, and they're coming up with things that people can eat, like abalone and seaweed. We're going to talk more about that and how this tradition got started. It's really interesting. I love culture. So we're going to South Korea's Jeju Island, and we're going to spend some time diving into South Korea's sea heritage. We're going to read through today's article, and then we'll be back. Imagine the thrill of diving into the ocean, holding your breath and exploring underwater worlds without any modern gear. This is the life of the Haenyeo, South Korea's sea women. Armed with only diving goggles and handmade tools, these skilled divers venture into the ocean's depths to manually harvest marine products like abalone and seaweed. The Haenyeo tradition, dating back to the 17th century, was originally dominated by men. However, a combination of wars and deep-sea fishing accidents created a shortage of male labor. Women's greater resistance to cold proved a blessing to the struggling communities. As a result, they began to harvest seafood along the coast to provide for their families. Most Haenyeo now live on Jeju Island, where they are introduced to the sea in childhood and learn to dive in their teens. Based on their abilities, they are ranked as low, middle, or high level. The top divers, or sangung, can dive up to 20 meters and hold their breath for over 2 minutes without oxygen tanks. They can even predict weather by the sea's sounds. If health permits, they will continue working and teaching beginners into old age. This is why many Haenyeo are over 60, with some even in their 80s. Seen as guardians of the sea, Haenyeo dedicate themselves to sustainable harvesting. They follow community regulations on work hours, catch sizes, and tool use. What Haenyeo do is not just a way to make a living, but a lifestyle that fosters a deep connection with nature. Sadly, their numbers are declining as the younger generation opts for different careers. In recognition of its importance, UNESCO declared Haenyeo culture an intangible cultural heritage in 2016. This not only helps protect this traditional culture, but also promotes the spirit of coexistence between humans and marine sustainability.
Okay, everybody, it's time for us to discuss the contents of today's lesson. It's something called Haenyeo, and it involves diving into the ocean without any specific equipment. You don't have a snorkel, you don't have a scuba tank. You just hold your breath and go down there, and that's what these ladies in Jeju are doing.
I think Haenyeo is what they call the ladies.
Oh, okay. So it's not really the practice, but it's actually the women. Sorry, I never studied Korean before. But in any case, we're diving into South Korea's sea heritage, which is kind of interesting because the term to dive into something can mean a couple of things. It can mean to start doing something with great enthusiasm. Hey, let's dive into today's lesson and start explaining things. But in this particular case, it means actually diving into the ocean. You plunge your body into the water, usually with your hands first, and then you go deep into the water. And in this particular case, we want you to imagine the thrill of diving into the ocean, holding your breath, and exploring underwater worlds without any modern gear. This is similar to snorkeling. I've done that before. I haven't done it in many years because I have a problem with getting water in my ears and I can't get it out. So I don't really do any snorkeling anymore. But basically, in this particular case, you hold your breath you don't breathe, you just keep the breath in because you do need to hold your breath if you go underwater, otherwise you're going to drown. And you want to explore underwater worlds, but in this particular case, you don't use any modern gear. You don't use scuba gear like flippers and wetsuits and goggles and stuff like that.
Oxygen tanks.
Exactly. It's just you and your body, and you just go down there in the water and you stay underwater for a long time.
They do get to wear diving goggles, so that's good.
That does help, yeah.
Now, let's go back to this word gear, guys. It's non-count. So don't try putting an S on it, okay? It's the same as equipment. In fact, you can usually substitute those two words for each other. Gear. Gear could be your gym gear or your baseball gear, which would be maybe your clothes, your glove, your bat, things like that you carry with you and you take to go and engage in some sort of activity. But it can include clothing. And remember, do not put an S on it. Camping gear, we'll often use it with camping to talk about your tent, your sleeping bags, maybe your stoves, your portable stoves that you take. That's a gear. So this is the life of the Haenyeo, South Korea's sea women. That's what they call themselves. So they're armed or they're equipped with only diving goggles and handmade tools. Your goggles are those big, large plastic glasses with usually an elastic band around the back of your head to keep them on your head. They need to be really tight or the water seeps in, and you don't want water to get into the goggles because then you can't see. So they only wear these diving goggles, but they also have handmade tools that they use to harvest whatever they're getting. If it's handmade, it's something they've created by hand. They're not using machines to come up with these tools.
Right. Of course, you wear goggles when you go swimming in the pool, so you don't let your eyes get all red from the chlorine in the water. But when you go diving, you can wear goggles as well. Even if it's just one piece over your face, it's still called goggles, just like we call our pants in the plural as well, or glasses, etc., etc. So yes, that's all you have there. You've got the goggles and you've got handmade tools. And with those tools, these skilled divers venture into the ocean's depths to manually harvest marine products like abalone and seaweed. So manually means you're using your hands, you're not using a machine. And I don't think they're going down to the bottom of the Marianas Trench or something like that, but they're going down quite a distance there offshore of Jeju Island, and they're going into the ocean, and they manually harvest those things. Again, they pick those things by hand. They don't use machines. And these are marine products. If something is marine, it has to do with the ocean. So here we've got marine products that come from the ocean, like abalone and seaweed. I think abalone in Chinese is baoyu, which can be a delicacy.
Right. It's not cheap, I can tell you that. Manually just means, as Tom said, by hand or not using any machines. So they're going to manually harvest marine products. Marine just means sea. I think the origin of this word goes back to a word that actually meant, in French, marine or sea, mer, M-A-R-E, sea.
Well, mar in Spanish means ocean, so
there you
I think
go.
it's probably got a Latin origin. Like the Miramar Hotel, it means the hotel that looks at the ocean.
Yeah.
Miramar, okay.
Yeah.
But yes, these are marine products like abalone and seaweed. We all love our seaweed here in Taiwan, but some people don't like it. It's kind of weird.
It's too salty for me.
Salty, yeah. But it's popular in Japanese food.
It's sure popular here too, huh?
Absolutely. I like it, but it's probably a little too salty. And here in the next paragraph it says, the Haenyeo tradition, dating back to the 17th century, was originally dominated by men. So this dates back to the 17th century. That was the 1600s. They've been doing this for 400 years or so. But at the beginning, of course, it was done by the men because men did those sorts of things, and the women were probably required to stay home and take care of the kids and cook the meals and stuff like that. But later on, it was the women who took over.
And why is that? Well, we lost a lot of men. Unfortunately, there was a combination of two things. Wars. the men would go to fight and die. And also the deep sea fishing accidents, where they lost a lot of these men to, accidents out there on the ocean. The ocean is natural and it's quite violent sometimes. We've lost a lot of people on boats and ships even today. There are a lot of people who still lose their lives while they're out on the sea. So because they lost these men, they had to come up with another idea. What's plan B? What are we going to do? A combination means when you put two or more things together. So we had a combination of wars, that's one thing, and deep sea fishing accidents. And if you have a shortage of something, you just don't have enough of something that you need. So they didn't have enough male labor, men who could perform this work. So women's greater resistance to cold proved a blessing to the struggling communities. Most people know that women have more fat on their bodies just naturally. We're supposed to have that fat. Helps women have babies. If you have fat, it's supposed to protect those babies from starvation. So that's why we have more fat. And because of that fat, it helps us feel less cold than some of the men around us. So they have this greater resistance to cold, and that proved a blessing. A blessing is something that's good for you. It's something that you welcome. It could be some sort of protection or favor, something that is definitely something that you're looking forward to. It's something that's good for you, a benefit.
Indeed. So again, that resistance to cold is good for them if they want to stay in the water for a long time. I also understand that layer of fat helps women become very good long-distance swimmers. I think they actually outperform the men there because the men get too cold because they lack that extra warmth. And so I suppose that has something to do with this here. The women can go down in the water because they can resist the cold much better than the men can. And as a result, they began to harvest seafood along the coast to provide for their families. So that's what you have to do for your family. You need to get food for them. Otherwise, they're going to starve, and you don't want that to happen. So here the women took over because the men were off fighting in wars, or they were on deep-sea trawlers out there trying to catch fish. And so the women took over, and the rest is history.
Right now, though, we're going to take a quick break and listen to our Chinese teacher, and then we'll be back to continue learning more about Haenyeo.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们今天带大家来做一个篇章结构的题型，这个篇章结构跟韩国的文化有关哦。不过我们不是在谈什么 K-pop 啦，我们要谈韩国的一个职业叫做海女。海女，跟海有关，没错，就是很会潜水的海女，在韩文当中叫做 Haenyeo。好，这个我练习了很久，我韩文呢是没有学过，但是这个字练习了很久。好，那篇章结构呢，我们到底要看什么？篇章结构基本上啊是句子填到文章里面呢，所以如果你不看选项的话，变成你看到一个这个题目的时候，要从头到尾又再看一遍，对不对？我们还是会建议大家先快速的浏览一下选项。那选项的 A 呢，在选项 A 里面，我们看到一个 PP 开头的 seen as 被视为海里的这个guardians， 谁被视为海洋守护者啊？如果看到这个的话，基本上就是分词构句啦，主词就是落在逗点之后。哦，原来是 Haenyeo， 原来是海女，他们就把自己奉献在海里面，而且呢，奉献的这件事情是 sustainable harvesting。 那在 A 选项里面呢，我们不管是看哪一个选项我们都要去稍微的推测跟思考一下，这个选项大概会落在文章的哪一个部分，或者是它的前后文可能会出现什么样的文意。例如在这一句话当中，倒数第二个字的 sustainable， 所谓永续的这个字其实就是一个关键，这是个关键。那个后面的 sustainable harvesting 到底是怎么样的一个永续法呢？一定会有相关的字词会呼应这个字，要不然如果说是不管海女啦还是渔夫啦，把那个海里面的鱼全部都捕光光了，那大家都没东西吃了，对不对？所以这个永续一定会跟文章有一些些许的关键字是相关的。那 B 选项开始看到的 top divers， 最厉害的 这一些潜水者，也就是海女嘛，最厉害的那个就是可以1分钟呢，大概不多2分钟在海底哦，而且可以潜下去差不多20公尺，不需要任何的 oxygen tanks。 所以看到 B 选项的时候，应该是上下文在描述海女这个职业她的能力，甚至有分级哦，因为有提到 top divers， 所以当我们在看选项的时候要看一些关键字。好，再来 C 选项。 C 选项说的是女生的对于冷这件事情的抵抗 proved 就证明了是一个好事情哦。对谁来说是一个 blessing 好事情呢？ To the struggling communities。 好，那 C 选项这里的关键字是什么呢？ C 选项这里的关键字是倒数第2个字的 struggling。 struggle 就是挣扎的意思，如果 communities 我们居住的环境很挣扎的话，有可能就是条件不好，通常都是很贫穷啦，没有食物啦，找不到工作啊，这样才会有 struggling 的文意出现。所以上下文应该会有提到哦，尤其是在这个选项当中已经有定冠词 the， 也就是说 C 选项的前面应该会有描述居住环境的贫穷，或者是有任何不利负面的地方，所以女生才会开始来当海女。好，接下来最后一个选项看到的是 UNESCO， 所以这个海女这个字这个职业很重要啦。 UNESCO 就把它这个在2016年的时候就联合国教科文组织就是将海女的这个文化列为非物质文化的遗产。所以如果看到遗产的话，就表示它很珍贵，需要好好的保护哦。有可能出现在文章最前面或最后面的地方。可是如果是最前面的话，在这个选项里面逗点之前的 its importance 它很重要，可是又没有描述，所以我们推测 D 选项呢应该会出现在文章比较后面做总结的地方，这样子的文章呢感觉文意比较会通顺一点。那在选项看完之后呢，我们就回过头来看一下到底要怎么选咯。当然第一段呢又给我们一个画面，这个画面就引导出我们看到海女这样子的工作是什么样的一个环境。总而言之就潜入海水，然后要直接的屏息，不用其他的一些什么氧气筒，就可以直接的下海。那这样子我们在第一段的地方虽然没有出到题目但是第3句还是要特别注意一下，它是一个分词构句哦。因为一开始的这个 armed with， 其实我们背片语的时候会背 be armed with， 也就是配有什么什么什么。所以看到的 armed 是一个过去分词，谁被配有逗点之后才是主词 These skilled divers， 也就是这些有技术的有技巧的很厉害的潜水者，指的就是海女。好，那接下来第2段就提到说为什么会有海女这个职业。原来是要追溯到17世纪的时候，当时其实还是男性主导啦。第2句开始出现关键咯，因为战争跟深海捕鱼事故导致男性的劳动力是缺乏的。在第2段，也就是第1句的前面有一个关键 shortage， 如果你把它圈出来的话，这个关键字刚好跟第1题答案 C 选项的 struggling communities 这个 struggling 做一个呼应。也就是因为这些原因，不管是战事啦，或者是因为在深海里面的这一些事故导致 male labor 男性的这个劳力短缺，不管是什么样的原因，就因此就导致了 C 选项女生就可以刚好来替代这个职业了。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. It's our culture unit, and we're taking a deep dive into South Korea's sea heritage and learning more about Haenyeo. Haenyeo are South Korean sea women who dive without modern-day gear. They dive into the sea and they go to harvest things like abalone, which is quite expensive, and seaweed, and they do it at a place, on a place called Jeju Island in South Korea. So we learned that they don't use any modern gear. But they do use goggles, which I'm grateful that they have because it's hard to see under the water without goggles. But they also use things that they make by hand, handmade tools. They're very skilled and they have a lot of lung or air capacity. We're going to find out how long they can stay under the water, which is amazing to me because I have no air. But they venture or they go into the ocean's depths and they manually, without any machinery, they manually harvest marine products. So the tradition dates back to the 17th century, the 1600s. Originally, it was done by men, of course. That's how life was. But we lost a lot of men through a combination of wars where, men kill each other from other countries, or maybe from the same country, we don't know, and deep sea fishing accidents. There are a lot of ships that crash or boating accidents. So we lost a lot of men to that. So the women kind of had to step up and take their place. They had kids to feed. You lose your husband, you still have to provide for your children. So they learned how to do this themselves. We also learned that women have a really great resistance to cold, and it proved a blessing, a gift from God, you could say, to the struggling communities. They were struggling because they didn't have enough food to feed their families or to sell to other people and trade for other goods that they needed. So as a result, that's when the women began to say, maybe we can do this ourselves. And they learned how to harvest seafood along the coast so they could provide for their families.
Okay, let's continue with the next paragraph here, the third paragraph. It says, most Haenyeo now live on Jeju Island. So maybe there are Haenyeo in other places around Korea there, but most of them live on Jeju Island, where they are introduced to the sea in childhood and learn to dive in their teens. So the women grow up there and they're introduced to the sea. Here's the ocean. And of course, it's not just a body of water. You need to know all sorts of things like about the tides and currents and sharks and seaweed and coral and things like that. There's a lot to learn about the sea. They learn about it when they're kids. And then when they're teenagers, when they're 13, 14, 15, etc., they learn to dive, and they probably learn how to hold their breaths, and they try to hold their breath longer and longer each time.
Yeah, so based on their abilities, everyone has different skills. For example, some people are really good in soccer because they can run for a longer time than others. Some are really good kickers, and some are good at protecting the net. Everyone has different skills and talents. So based on their abilities, they are ranked as low, middle, or high level. And I'm sure they have different responsibilities based on their skill level. The top divers, they actually have a name for them. They're called sanggong. They can dive up to 20 meters deep, which is amazing to me. And they can hold their breath for over 2 minutes without oxygen tanks. I got pretty good. I could hold this is before asthma, I could hold my breath for past 1 minute and 30 seconds, but 2 minutes and really deep into the ocean, I'm talking about a swimming pool for me. That's a lot easier. They can dive really deeply into the sea, and they also can hold their breath. What is oxygen, Tom?
That's a gas that we all need to breathe. I think there's a low percentage of oxygen in the atmosphere, maybe 16% or something like that. Most of the atmosphere is composed of nitrogen, but oxygen, of course, is what we need to breathe. It's O, the chemical symbol is O, H2O, two atoms of hydrogen with one atom of oxygen gives us a water molecule. And they don't need oxygen tanks to dive so deep. They can even predict weather by the sea's sounds. So they can listen to the sea, maybe the sound of the waves, or when they're under the water, they can hear certain sounds. I remember being able to hear this constant clicking sound when I was doing some snorkeling. I had no idea. I had no idea where that was coming from.
Wasn't crabs or something like that?
It could have been something down there. I don't know, but I guess these ladies learn how to predict the weather by listening to the sea. And if health permits, if they're healthy, they will continue working and teaching beginners into old age. So if health permits, which means if they continue to be healthy, they'll be able to continue working, and then they can teach new girls how to do this. This is why many Haenyeo are over 60, with some even in their 80s. So there are a lot of ladies doing this, and they're aging. And I suppose younger people are probably not as interested in this. They want to go to Seoul to get a nice job and make a ton of money.
I wanted to mention this sentence here, if health permits. You can substitute that. We use this kind of sentence pattern or sentence structure, you could say, when we talk about something that allows us to do something else. So, if time permits, I will help you with your homework tonight. Or if our budget permits, we're going to go to more countries in Europe rather than just stay in France or Italy.
A very common one is if weather permits.
Sure.
We're going to the beach if weather permits. If it's a good day, we can go to the beach. Otherwise, if it's raining, we'll go to karaoke or something like that. But in any case, yes, they can predict the weather by listening to the sea. And again, lots of these ladies are over 60, and some are even in their 80s. So good on them.
Yeah.
Here in the next paragraph here, it says, seen as guardians of the sea, Haenyeo dedicate themselves to sustainable harvesting. So yes, a lot of people have a lot of respect for them. So they see them or regard them as guardians of the sea. They kind of protect the sea, and they dedicate themselves to sustainable harvesting. If it's sustainable, that means they can keep doing it year after year. They don't take all the stuff out, and then next year there won't be anything there. They make sure that it continues to reproduce itself.
Which is really good. You have to do that if you're talking about something that's a natural resource. And of course, marine animals and marine products are a natural resource that we've been given here on Earth. We need to protect it, not overfish. You've heard that phrase before, right? So they dedicate themselves to sustainable harvesting. They follow community regulations on work hours. Their community gets together and says, hey, here are the rules, folks. You need to obey them. You can only work during these hours, or you can't work more than a certain amount of hours. Catch sizes refers to how much they bring in at a time. You catch a fish. Was your catch good out there today? How many fish did you catch? Tool use, they can only use handmade tools, it sounds like. And what Haenyeo do is not just a way to make a living, although that's how they make their living, but it's a lifestyle that they have, and it fosters or continues to develop a deep connection with nature, which is really important.
Okay, moving on now to the final paragraph. It says, sadly, their numbers are declining as the younger generation opts for different careers, which is something I just mentioned here.
Yeah.
Young people aren't so interested in that. They want some nice careers in bigger cities where there is more excitement. So yes, their numbers are declining. That's from the verb to decline, which means to become smaller or lower in number. There are just fewer and fewer of these women doing this because there aren't a lot of new people who are willing to do this job as well. And so fewer and fewer people are doing this, so their numbers are declining.
So the younger generation is opting for different careers. They're choosing different jobs or different careers. To opt is another word for choose. You can opt for something. That something following that would be a noun. Okay, opt for something. Or if you have a verb after opt, then it's opt to do something. So in recognition of its importance, the Haenyeo women we're talking about, UNESCO declared Haenyeo culture an intangible cultural heritage in 2016. Intangible means you can't really touch it. It's not like you're saying, oh, this building is a heritage site. It's actually the whole practice of diving and the way that they do it, that's being protected.
Kind of the concept here. So yes, indeed, it has some recognition from the UN there, from UNESCO. And this not only helps protect this traditional culture, but also promotes the spirit of coexistence between humans and marine sustainability. So we have this coexistence. Sea life basically can continue to live, and then people can get food from the sea. and it's kind of a win-win situation for everybody. So hopefully this culture or this tradition will continue for a long time to come. We're at the end of our discussion for today. We'll turn things over now to our Chinese teacher.
那到了第3段呢，就是介绍一个现况啦。那到现在呢，大多数的海女都是住在济州岛上，而且从小就接触大海，青少年就学习潜水了。接下来的第2句我们就看到关键咯。根据能力，他们会被分为低、中、高3个等级，所以在第3段第2句有一个关键字 abilities， 这个能力后面我们又看到 low, middle or high level， 也就是呼应到了第2题，最厉害的甚至可以潜20公尺，然后2分钟都不呼吸嘞，所以第2题选 B， 上下文才会通顺。好，那到了第3段呢，我们就看到接下来的第4段。第4段一开始不晓得提到什么，可是第4段的第2句这边有关键哦。Regulations 有规范， work hours 什么时候才可以潜下去这个捕捉猎物， catch sizes 多大的才可以捕，小的不行， and tool use 然后呢只能用哪一些工具。这些规范不就是为了要让海洋生物可以永续吗？所以第4段第2句刚好就呼应了我们后面的这个 A 选项 sustainable 的这个关键字。那当然最后面这个第4题这就只剩下一个选项了齁。那当然这个一个选项我们还是要看一下是不是上下文真的呼应，没有错，在最后一段第3句的地方 protect 有没有保护，这可以保护这个传统的文化啊，然后也可以让人类跟海洋的永续是可以共存的。所以第4题呢，答案就选到 D 这个选项。希望大家经过今天的这个练习之后，以后在篇章结构能够更有把握。我是安娜，我们下次见。
That's all the time we have for today, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and maybe we have inspired you to learn to do some snorkeling or scuba diving or even travel to Jeju Island in Korea. I'm sure they'd love to have you. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.